The sky of Vrinus 9 was always strange. Its clouds were not white or gray, but had a deep silver color that moved like liquid metal across the heavens. The air carried a low electric hum, and the ground often trembled when the planet's weather shifted. To most species, it was a dangerous world. To humans, it was a challenge waiting to be met. A group of alien researchers from the planet Tyrellin had landed on Vrinus 9 for a climate study. They were tall, thin creatures with bright eyes and soft blue skin. Their minds were sharp, and their technology was far ahead of anything humans had built. They trusted their machines completely. Machines that could predict weather, measure air currents, and create protective shields. Along with them was one human, Captain Elias Ward, a quiet engineer from Earth. He was not the team's leader, but he was respected for his experience with rough environments. Elias had spent years helping colonies survive in harsh worlds. He did not talk much, but when he did, people listened. The Tyrellins thought the mission would be simple. Their scanners told them that the weather would stay calm for 6 days. They set up shining silver tents powered by small energy cores. The shields around their camp glowed softly, keeping the rain and wind away. Elias helped with the heavy work, carrying crates and checking the tools. He noticed how quickly the Tyrellins grew comfortable. They trusted their readings too much, and when he warned them that the sky looked too still, they only smiled politely. "Do not worry, Captain Ward," said Caravin, the lead scientist. "Our models are perfect. This planet's storms are hundreds of kilometers away." Elias looked at the clouds. They were not hundreds of kilometers away. They were growing right above them. But he did not argue. He had seen this before. People who believed machines more than their own eyes. As night came, the silver sky turned black. The hum in the air grew louder and the ground began to shake. Elias stepped outside his tent, scanning the horizon. A thin line of lightning flashed in the distance. Then another. Soon the whole horizon glowed. Inside the main tent, the Tyrellins laughed and talked about data readings. None of them noticed that the wind had changed direction. The breeze was gone. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was holding its breath. Elias knew that feeling. On Earth, it came just before a storm broke loose. He grabbed his pack, checking his tools. "Caravin," he called out. "You might want to shut down the scanners and reinforce the shields." Caravin looked at him, confused. "Why, there is no alert." Elias didn't answer. He stepped outside again, eyes on the sky. A sudden crack of thunder split the silence. The first bolt of lightning struck only a few kilometers away. The ground lit up white and the storm had begun. The Tyrellins ran out of their tents, alarmed. The soft rain turned heavy within seconds. Droplets hit the ground like small stones. Their weather system started beeping in warning tones. "Impossible," one of them shouted. The forecast was clear. Elias didn't waste time. "It's real now," he said calmly. "Get your equipment safe and power down the external shields and they'll draw lightning." But panic spread. The aliens tried to adjust their control panels, shouting numbers and commands. Their shield generators flickered. Sparks shot from one of the devices. A sharp electrical smell filled the air. Elias sighed. He grabbed a blanket, wrapped his tools inside, and moved toward the edge of the camp. He could already feel the ground turning soft and muddy under his boots. The rain was not just water. It had a slight chemical sting to it. His skin prickled where drops hit. Behind him, one of the alien domes collapsed under the growing wind. A Tyrellin screamed in fear as sparks danced across the wet metal. Elias turned back and saw Caravin standing helplessly in the rain. Her hair stuck to her head, eyes wide with disbelief. He ran to her and pulled her away from the collapsing structure. "Your shields are gone," he shouted over the wind. "We need to move now." She looked around. "But where? We have no shelter." Elias pointed toward a small ridge nearby. "There, higher ground. If we stay low, the runoff will flood us." The aliens followed, shivering and soaked. Their silver clothing clung to their bodies, not made for this kind of weather. Their boots slipped in the mud. Their once perfect technology now sparked uselessly behind them, half buried under water and soil. When they reached the ridge, the group collapsed, exhausted. The wind howled like a living thing, shaking the trees around them. Caravin turned to Elias. "What do we do now?" "Our shelters are destroyed." Elias looked at the landscape. The storm wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was getting worse. He could feel the energy in the air, the kind of storm that could last hours, maybe days. He set down his pack and pulled out a simple metal tool. "I'll build something," he said. The aliens stared at him. "With what?" one of them asked. "We have nothing left." Elias smiled slightly. "There's always something." He walked toward a group of fallen plants. They looked like trees, but their trunks were made of a flexible mineral fiber. He tapped one, solid enough to withstand wind. He began breaking branches, stacking them in a pattern. His movements were quick, practiced. Every motion had purpose. Caravan watched in silence. "This is primitive," she muttered. "Primitive works," Elias replied, tying the first few beams together with vine-like roots. "Your tech is too fragile for this place. Nature respects simple things." Hours passed. The aliens sat together under their cloaks, watching him work through the storm. He used flat stones to weigh down corners, digging into the ground with his hands to anchor the structure. Water ran through the channels he dug, flowing away from the small rising platform he built. By the time he placed the final covering, large, leaf-like plates that grew naturally waterproof, the shelter stood strong and steady, barely moving under the harsh wind. It was small, but it was enough. Elias stepped inside, shaking off water. He looked back at the group. "It's not fancy, but it's dry. Come on." At first, none of the Trellans moved. Their pride held them still. But then a strong gust tore through their thin cloaks and cold rain stung their skin again. Slowly, they followed him. Inside, the air was calm. The floor was dry. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, harmless drops. The aliens sat close together, speechless. They had never been in something built so simply, yet so effectively. Caravan finally spoke. "You built this." "With your hands," Elias nodded. "Hands and a little common sense." She looked around, trying to understand. "How did you know what to use?" "Experience," he said softly. "You spend enough nights in bad weather, you start to see what works and what doesn't." Outside, lightning flashed again, but the shelter stood firm. The aliens could hear the storm tearing at the world beyond, yet inside it felt like a small bubble of peace. For the first time that night, they felt safe. Caravan stared at Elias, her scientific mind racing. "Our scanners could not predict this storm. Our shields failed. Yet you, with no technology, made this." Elias gave a small shrug. "Sometimes the universe doesn't care about fancy tools. You just have to work with what it gives you." She nodded slowly, respect growing in her eyes. "Perhaps humans are better suited for chaos than we thought." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe we just got used to it." The storm continued through the night. Thunder rolled, rain poured, but the small shelter did not fall. Inside, the aliens listened to the human's quiet breathing as he rested against the wall, eyes half closed. He wasn't afraid of the storm, he was part of it, understanding it in a way their science never could. And as lightning painted the sky silver, one thought echoed in Caravan's mind. He built safety out of nothing. The storm on Vrinus 9 had only just begun, and so had their lesson about humanity. The storm raged across the sky of Vrinus 9 all through the night. Lightning flashed like rivers of fire, and the thunder rolled so loud that the ground shook. The Trellans huddled close together inside the small shelter, afraid every time a flash lit up the world outside. But the walls that Elias Ward had built with his bare hands held strong. By morning, the rain slowed down. A gray mist covered the valley below. The alien scientists stepped out carefully, still surprised that they were alive. Their once perfect camp was gone. The shiny silver tents were flattened. The power cores had shorted out. Even their scanners, made with the best technology, were nothing more than burnt metal. Caravan, the lead scientist, stood in silence. Her people had believed their technology could handle anything. Yet one human, using mud, rocks, and branches, had built something that survived a storm their machines could not. Elias stepped outside, stretching his arms. His uniform was still damp, but he looked calm and steady. He walked around the area, checking how much damage the storm had caused. Then he turned to the Trellans and said, "We'll need to rebuild our base. But this time we do it the right way." One of the aliens, Torvek, frowned. "The right way? You mean the human way?" Elias smiled slightly. "If you want it to survive, yes." The aliens looked uncertain. They were scientists, not builders. On Trellan, machines did everything for them. They had never used their hands to build anything. Their knowledge came from data, not experience. Yet now their data had failed, and the only thing that saved them was the human's primitive method. Elias walked to a fallen tree-like plant. "This storm will return," he said. "We can't depend on what's broken. We'll use what's around us." Caravan followed him. "But our scanners said these trees are too weak." "The wind pressure," he interrupted her gently. "Your scanners didn't stand through the night. These did." That simple truth silenced her. She realized that the human had been watching, studying, and learning, even without machines. His eyes had done what their sensors couldn't, understand the nature of the storm. Building begins. The group started to help Elias. At first, they were clumsy. Their hands were not made for gripping tools, and they found it strange to touch dirt and stone. But Elias guided them patiently. "Stack the stones like this," he said, placing flat ones at the bottom. "They make a strong base. Don't fight the wind. Shape around it." Caravan watched him dig trenches again around the new site. "Why do you always dig around the edges?" she asked. "For the rain," Elias explained. "You can't stop water. You give it a path and it leaves you alone." His logic was simple but powerful. The aliens recorded everything, taking notes on their tablets. Yet the human didn't use any screen or chart. He just looked, felt, and built. By midday, they had raised the walls of a new shelter. This one was larger, strong enough to fit the whole team. Elias used the mineral vines again, weaving them through the gaps. When he finished, the structure looked rough, uneven, unpolished, but it was stable and dry. The alien stepped inside, touching the walls with awe. The temperature inside was warm. The sound of the wind was soft and distant. Caravan looked around. "This feels alive," Elias nodded. "That's because it is. Built from the world, not against it." For the first time, the Tyrellans began to see the planet differently. It was not an enemy to control, but a force to understand. They had come to study Vrinus 9, yet it was now teaching them. The test later that evening, a smaller storm rolled over the horizon. The aliens grew nervous, fearing another disaster, but Elias only smiled. "Good," he said. "Now we'll see if our work was worth it." They all gathered inside as the wind started again. The rain struck hard, but the shelter stood firm. No leaks, no shaking, no sparks. Just the steady sound of nature outside. The aliens looked at one another in disbelief. "This is impossible," Torvek whispered. "We built this with our hands, and it works." Elias sat near the entrance, calm as ever. "You just had to trust it. The world tells you what it needs when if you listen." Caravan looked at him thoughtfully. "You speak like nature is alive," he smiled. "It is in its own way. Back on Earth, our ancestors learned that early. We didn't have shields or scanners, just our senses and a will to survive." She tilted her head. "You think that is what makes humans different?" Elias poked at the small fire he had built from dry twigs. "Not different, just stubborn. We don't give up even when we should." The firelight flickered on the aliens' faces. They watched him quietly. Something in his words touched them deeply. The Tyrellans were known for logic and calculation, but this human spoke from something else, something they couldn't measure. The discovery. The next morning, the rain finally stopped. The valley shimmered with moisture, the ground steaming under the new sunlight. Elias led the group down to what was left of their camp. As they walked, Caravan noticed how he kept observing everything. How the soil absorbed water, how the trees bent with the wind, how the clouds moved. Every small detail mattered to him. When they reached the ruined scanners, Elias crouched and picked up a broken device. "Too many moving parts," he muttered. "If one thing fails, it all fails." Caravan knelt beside him. "Can you fix it?" "Maybe," he said, "but not the way it was. Technology is great, but it's only as smart as the one using it." He began repairing one of the smaller tools, using pieces from several broken ones. The aliens watched him connect wires, carve connectors, and test them manually. He didn't use advanced code or data. He just understood how things worked, from touch, sight, and sound. After an hour, the device hummed softly. Elias smiled. "See? Old trick from an old mechanic." The aliens clapped lightly, their way of showing respect. Caravan smiled too. "You fix machines and build homes. What can't you do?" Elias chuckled. "Fly without wings." They all laughed, even Torvik, who had been the most doubtful. For the first time since the mission began, the group felt united. The fear from the storm was replaced by admiration for their human teammate. Respect grows that night as they sat around the fire. Caravan recorded a message on her log tablet. Day 7. The human Elias Ward continues to surprise us. He does not depend on technology as we do. He reads the planet like one reads a book. There is something powerful in his simplicity, a kind of intelligence that cannot be programmed. She looked at him from across the fire. He was quietly carving a piece of wood into a small model of their new shelter. His hands were rough, his face calm. Every line on his face spoke of patience and experience. "Elias," she said softly, "on Torellon, we always believed that knowledge means control. But you work with chaos. You don't fight it." He looked up. "Control is an illusion. You don't control a storm, you prepare for it. You respect it." Her eyes glowed with understanding. "Maybe that's why your kind keeps surviving." He smiled. "Maybe." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the stars shone through thin clouds. The world was still dangerous, but somehow it didn't feel threatening anymore. The next day, the Torellons followed Elias into the forest to gather more materials. This time, he didn't have to tell them what to do. They had started to learn, testing branches, checking fibers, feeling the ground. Caravan noticed something unusual near a rock wall, a glowing mineral vein that pulsed with soft light. She called Elias over. "What is this?" He touched it carefully. "Natural conductor. Maybe the reason lightning hits this area so often. We can use it." "Use it? For what?" "Grounding," he explained. "If we run this through the soil near our shelter, it'll pull lightning strikes away. That way our home stays safe." The aliens looked amazed. Their technology used similar concepts, but Elias had just discovered a natural version of it, by sight alone. He was using the planet's own design to strengthen theirs. When they returned, they worked together to place the mineral lines around the shelter. Elias taught them to secure it with stone anchors. It took the whole day, but when they finished, the system was simple and perfect. Caravan stood back, admiring the work. "It's a beautiful," she said. "Built by instinct, not machines." Elias smiled. "Built by both now. You added your own touch." She nodded proudly. "Then maybe we've learned something human today." That night, lightning flashed again far in the distance. But the Torellons didn't panic. They sat calmly inside the shelter, confident that it would hold. And it did. As the rain tapped gently on the roof, Caravan whispered, "We built it together." "The human way." Elias leaned back, closing his eyes. "That's the only way that lasts." Outside, the storm passed quietly, and for the first time, the aliens of Torellon slept peacefully through it, safe inside a shelter built not from technology, but from trust, patience, and the wisdom of a human mind. The next morning on Vrinus 9 was calm and bright. A golden light poured over the wet forests and steaming rocks. The air was fresh, almost peaceful, as if the planet itself was resting after the wild night. The Torellon team stepped out of the shelter they had built with Elias Ward, the human engineer. It stood proudly on the ridge, its walls still strong and dry. Around it, the land was covered with fallen trees, broken stones, and deep puddles from the endless rain. Caravan raised her recording device and began to speak. Day 9. The human-made shelter has survived multiple storm cycles without a single structural failure. This design, it defies everything we thought we knew about planetary survival. Elias smiled as he packed his gear. "It's not really my design," he said. "It's the planet's. I just followed its rules." Torvik laughed lightly. "You speak like the planet is your friend." Elias shrugged. "It's not my friend, but it's not my enemy either. If you respect a place, it'll show you how to live in it." The aliens looked around quietly. They had always seen worlds as things to be studied, not understood. But now they began to see through human eyes. Every rock, every sound of the wind, every drop of rain told a story. The signal later that morning, Caravan noticed a small red light blinking on one of their half-broken scanners. "A signal," she said quickly. "From our ship in orbit." Elias walked over. "Can you talk to them?" She shook her head. "No voice contact. Only a data ping. It's weak, maybe because of the storm layers." He thought for a moment. "Then we'll need a relay." The aliens exchanged confused looks. "A relay? We have no working towers left," Torvik said. Elias pointed to a tall metallic tree trunk nearby. "That will do." Before anyone could argue, he was already climbing. His movements were quick and balanced. The Torellons stood below, amazed. Their species rarely used physical strength. Everything they did was automated. But the human climbed like he had done it 100 times before. At the top, Elias tied a thin wire, a piece of broken equipment he had repaired by hand. "This should boost your signal," he called down. "Try it now." Caravan adjusted the scanner. The screen flickered, then cleared. A soft tone rang, connection established. "It's working," she shouted. The aliens cheered, their bright eyes glowing with joy. For a moment, they forgot how hopeless they had felt only days ago. All it took was one human's creativity to turn disaster into progress. A new challenge, but peace never lasted long on Vrenus 9. That afternoon, the ground trembled slightly. Small rocks rolled down from the ridge. Elias felt it first, a faint vibration under his boots. He looked toward the east and saw dark clouds rising again, taller than before. "The storm's not over," he said softly. Caravan frowned. "But the pressure readings are normal." Elias shook his head. "Trust your senses, not your screens." Moments later, the sky flashed white. A massive thunderclap rolled through the valley, louder than any before. The aliens flinched and Torvek's scanner burst into sparks. The storm had returned, the angrier this time. The wind howled like a beast. The trees bent low and lightning tore across the horizon in every direction. The air buzzed with static energy. Even the ground seemed alive with power. Elias acted fast. "Everyone inside," he shouted. The aliens ran back into the shelter they had built together. The structure groaned slightly as the wind hit, but it did not break. The walls held firm. Elias adjusted the mineral lines they had buried earlier, the ones that conducted lightning safely into the ground. They glowed faintly, pulling the deadly energy away from them. Caravan watched, amazed. "It's working," Elias nodded. "Told you the planet provides the tools." Holding the line, the storm lasted for hours. The rain fell so heavily it sounded like stones hitting the roof. Water streamed through the trenches Elias had dug earlier, rushing down the slope but never entering the shelter. The wind screamed outside, but inside the air was calm and dry. Still, the aliens were afraid. Their hearts raced each time thunder hit. Torvek covered his ears, shaking. "It's too strong. It will tear us apart." Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. "It won't. We built it right. Trust it." There was something in his voice, and quiet but strong, that made them believe him. They steadied themselves and waited. An hour later, a deafening blast of lightning struck a nearby tree. The whole world lit up white for a moment. The shelter shook, dust falling from the ceiling. The Trellans gasped. Elias checked the grounding wires. "Still fine," he said calmly. The charge went into the soil. "We're safe." "How can you be so calm?" Caravan asked, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled faintly. "I've lived through worse. You learn to breathe through the chaos." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You are not like any being I have met." "Humans usually aren't," he said quietly. The storm raged on for what felt like forever. But finally, near dawn, the wind began to fade. The thunder grew distant, and the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. The shelter stood strong, untouched by the violence outside. The morning after. When the Trellans stepped outside, the valley looked completely different. Trees were torn down, rocks had split, and rivers of mud flowed through what had been their camp. Yet in the middle of all that destruction, their shelter stood proud and unbroken. Caravan turned to Elias. "You saved us again." He shook his head. "No, we saved ourselves. You helped build this too. But without you," she said softly, "we would not have known how." He smiled. "Then you know now. That's what matters." The aliens looked at the horizon. The rising sun painted the clouds gold and pink. It was a beautiful sight, one they might not have lived to see without the human's strange wisdom. Caravan began recording again. Day 10. Human methods continue to defy expectation. His use of instinct over data may represent a new form of intelligence, one born not from calculation, but survival. Elias chuckled when he heard her say that. "You make it sound like magic." "Maybe it is," she said. "A kind of magic made from courage." The realization. As the day warmed, the Trellans began cleaning up the area, gathering what little equipment remained usable. Torvek managed to power up one of the smaller drones. It scanned the land, showing deep trenches carved by water. The image made Caravan pause. "These flood paths," she said slowly, "they match your drainage system exactly. You predicted how the storm would move. Elias nodded. Not predicted and observed. Nature repeats itself. Once you see the pattern, you can work with it. The aliens exchanged glances. To them, this way of thinking was new, learning not by theory but by watching and feeling. Elias had done in a few days what their best models could not. Torvek bowed slightly. Your people must be very advanced. Elias laughed softly. Not advanced, just stubborn and curious. That's our trick. A quiet night that evening, they built a small fire near the shelter. The flames danced gently, reflecting in the aliens' bright eyes. They cooked a simple meal from ration packs and roots Elias had found nearby. The air was cool but peaceful. Caravan sat beside him. You could have left us, she said. When our tech failed, you could have waited out the storm alone. Why did you stay? He looked at the fire. Because that's not what humans do. We stick together, and even when it's hard. She nodded slowly. Your kind is strange. And strong, he smiled. We just don't like losing. There was a long silence as they watched the stars. The sky was clear now, filled with shining lights. Caravan thought about how humans came from one small planet, yet they survived everywhere, deserts, snow, storms, even worlds like this. She finally said, Perhaps it's not your machines that make your species powerful. It's your hearts. Elias looked up at the stars. Maybe. Or maybe we just learn to keep moving no matter what tries to stop us. The next mission, the next morning, the communication system finally stabilized. A faint voice came through, the Tyrellon command ship. They were sending a rescue vessel to retrieve the team. The aliens cheered, but a strange sadness filled the camp. They had grown attached to this human, their quiet, stubborn savior. Caravan turned to him. When they come, will you leave right away? He nodded. That's the job. But before that, I'll make sure you can survive without me. She smiled softly. We've learned much already. Then let's make sure it lasts, he said. We'll build one more shelter, bigger, stronger, a symbol of what we learned. And so for the next 2 days, they worked together again. They built a second structure, not just a home but a monument to survival. It combined both Tyrellon science and human instinct. It was elegant yet practical, strong yet simple. When they finished, Caravan placed her hand on its wall. This will stand for generations, she said proudly. Elias nodded. Then maybe one day someone else will see it and remember that a human once showed you how to build it. She looked at him with deep respect. No, Elias Ward, you didn't just build a shelter. You built understanding. He smiled quietly. That's the best thing we can build. As the rescue ship's lights appeared in the sky, the Tyrellons stood beside their new home. The wind blew softly around them, not as an enemy, but as an old friend, and Elias Ward, the human who built safety from nothing, looked up at the stormy heavens and whispered, We've come a long way from the rain. The morning on Vrinus 9 was unusually bright. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the world sparkling with moisture. Every leaf, every rock, and every puddle reflected the sunlight like a jewel. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh growth. Birds with silver feathers glided above the trees, chirping in strange melodic tones. The Tyrellon team had never seen a world recover so quickly from a storm. They were amazed. Their sensors showed that nearly all of their equipment had been destroyed. But in the center of the chaos, the shelter that Elias Ward had built stood intact. Not only intact, it seemed to thrive, blending into the landscape as if it belonged there. Caravan knelt down to touch one of the walls. She ran her fingers over the woven vines, the mineral stones, the carefully stacked leaves. This is remarkable, she whispered. I've never seen anything like it. Elias was crouched nearby, examining the ground around the shelter. It's not magic, he said. It's just careful planning and learning to read the land. The planet tells you what to do if you pay attention. The aliens looked at him with curiosity. They had thought that survival meant machines, calculations, and shields. Yet, here was proof that human intuition, paired with observation, could surpass even the most advanced technology. Understanding human ingenuity over breakfast, simple rations mixed with edible plants they had foraged. Caravan asked Elias a question that had been on her mind for days. Why do humans survive in so many places? Deserts, ice fields, mountains, even worlds that kill most species. How do you do it? Elias chuckled lightly. We learn to adapt. We fail, we get up, we try again. Every storm teaches something. Every fire, flood, or cold night gives us knowledge. We keep building even when it seems impossible. Torvik tilted his head. But your machines are not perfect either. You must fail often. Yes, Elias admitted. Our machines break. Our plans fail. But we don't stop. We find another way. That's what matters. The Tyrellans exchanged looks. For them, failure was unacceptable, an anomaly in a perfect system. But humans treated failure like a teacher, and Elias had proven it true. He had taken nothing, not even technology, and built a shelter that survived storms their machines could not. Caravin nodded slowly. Perhaps. This is why your kind is respected across many planets. Elias smiled faintly. Or maybe we just don't like giving up. The shelter, as a teacher, Elias led the team outside to inspect the land. He pointed at the trenches he had dug. These carry water away from the shelter. That keeps the base dry. Without it, even the strongest walls could fail. He showed them how the vine fibers acted like tension cables, holding the structure together even under high wind pressure. He explained how the stone foundation distributed weight evenly. The Tyrellans listened carefully, taking notes and recording everything. But why use natural materials? Caravin asked. Why not repair your machines instead? Elias looked at the trees swaying gently in the wind. Because nature doesn't fail like machines. Stones, vines, soil, they are here for millions of years. Machines can fail in a second. You can repair, but nature is permanent. You learn to use it instead of fight it. Caravin studied him closely. There was a kind of quiet confidence in Elias that went beyond engineering. He seemed to understand life itself, how storms, wind, rain, and earth worked together. He didn't just build a shelter. He built harmony with the planet, testing the shelter. Again, that afternoon, another storm approached, smaller than the last, but still strong enough to test their work. Lightning streaked across the sky and heavy clouds rolled toward the ridge. Time to see if it holds, Elias said calmly. Everybody inside. The aliens rushed in, slightly nervous. They had begun to trust him, but storms on Vrinus 9 were unpredictable. The rain began, hitting the roof hard, and the wind blew fiercely, shaking the walls, but the shelter held firm. The trenches worked as designed, carrying the water safely away. The walls absorbed the force of the wind without cracking. The mineral grounding conducted small electrical charges harmlessly into the ground. Even when a large tree branch fell nearby, the structure absorbed the shock without damage. The Tyrellans were stunned. It's perfect, Torvik said. Even our machines would not have survived that. Elias nodded. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to work with what you have. The moment of respect. After the storm passed, Caravin stepped outside. She looked at the shelter with new admiration. This is not just a building. It's a lesson. Elias raised an eyebrow. A lesson in what? In survival. In respect for the land. In using your mind instead of relying on machines alone, she said. Your people. Humans. You have something we lack, he smiled. Maybe. Or maybe you just haven't had to survive without machines before. She laughed softly, realizing he was right. The Tyrellans had lived in perfect cities with perfect equipment. Their world had taught them control, but not adaptability. Elias had shown them the other side, the power of patience, observation, and will. The other aliens gathered around, nodding. They began to see that the shelter was not just protection from storms. It was a symbol, a reminder that survival depended on more than data or technology. It depended on courage, creativity, and determination. Preparing for the future. The group spent the rest of the day reinforcing the shelter. Elias taught them how to repair minor damage and strengthen weak points. He also showed them how to find natural materials nearby, so that even if their machines failed, they could continue building. This planet is harsh, he said, but it gives everything you need. You just have to look for it. Caravin nodded. And now we know. We've learned more in these few days than we could have in months of simulation. Elias smiled. Experience is better than simulation. Sensors can tell you what happens, but they can't tell you what it feels like. The Tyrellans began practicing what he taught them. They dug small trenches, wove fibers, and tested the strength of branches. By the end of the day, they had not only rebuilt the shelter, but had added improvements of their own. A small observation deck, a rainwater catchment system, and even a small wind barrier to protect the entrance. Elias watched quietly, pleased. Now you can survive storms without me. Caravan looked at him seriously. It's more than survival. We've learned a philosophy, human philosophy. He laughed softly. Call it stubbornness if you want. A quiet evening, as the sun set, the sky turned orange and purple. The Tyrellans sat near the fire outside the shelter, still amazed by what had happened. Their storm had tested them. It had tested their machines. And it had tested a human. But Elias had shown them that technology alone was not enough. Humans survived because they adapted, because they observed, and because they refused to give up. Caravan recorded her final note for the day. Elias Ward has taught us that survival is more than equipment and formulas. It is intelligence, creativity, and courage. Humans can build from nothing and survive where others fail. Elias watched the fire, quiet as usual. You'll remember this, he said softly. Not because of me, but because you saw it work. The aliens nodded. They would remember. The shelter would remain a symbol, proof that humans could face chaos and still build safety from nothing. Outside, the wind rustled the trees gently, no longer threatening. The stars began to shine, mirrored in the puddles on the ground. The shelter stood strong, and so did the lesson it carried. Elias looked up at the sky and whispered quietly. Almost to himself, the storm teaches those who listen, and the Tyrellans, for the first time, understood. The sun rose over Vrinus 9, painting the valley in shades of gold and silver. The storm had passed completely. The ground, still wet from days of rain, shimmered as sunlight reflected off puddles in the smooth stones of the new shelter. Inside the shelter, the Tyrellans were busy reviewing notes, repairing minor damages and preparing to leave. They had learned much about survival, but they still marveled at the human who had taught them. Elias Ward moved quietly among them, checking materials and giving small tips. Caravan approached him. The rescue ship will arrive soon. Are you ready to leave? Elias nodded. Yes, but first I want to make sure you can handle the next storm on your own. She smiled. We can. You've taught us everything we need. More than that, you've taught us how to think differently. Elias glanced around at the shelter. It was no longer just a small structure to protect them from rain and wind. It had become a symbol of human ingenuity, a place built from nothing but instinct, observation, and courage. The final test. The team decided to perform one final test before leaving. A distant storm was forming on the horizon. Elias led the Tyrellans through every step, reinforcing walls, checking drainage, securing loose branches, and grounding minerals. Each alien followed carefully, learning to use their hands as much as their minds. Remember, Elias said, the storm doesn't care about your calculations. Respect it, observe it, and prepare. That's the human way. The storm approached faster than predicted. Rain fell in sheets, wind shredded the nearby trees, and lightning flashed across the sky. The Tyrellans felt fear rising, but Elias remained calm. His confidence was contagious. Inside the shelter, they watched as the structure held firm. Water flowed along the trenches. Mineral lines conducted energy safely into the soil, and the woven walls absorbed the wind without cracking. Every step Elias had taught them worked perfectly. Caravan looked at him with wonder. It's incredible. Not a single failure, Elias smiled. That's because you followed the lesson. Not just my instructions of the lesson. Observe, adapt, survive. The storm passed within an hour. The Tyrellans were exhilarated. They had not only survived, but they had learned to survive. A lesson more valuable than any technology they had brought with them. Reflection and respect. After the storm, the group gathered outside the shelter. The valley was transformed, fallen trees, muddy rivers, and broken terrain, yet the human-made shelter stood as a beacon of stability. Caravan spoke first. You did not just save us. You changed how we see the world. On Tyrellan, we rely on machines and calculations, but now we understand there is more to survival than data. Elias nodded. Machines are tools. Nature is the teacher. Humans learned that a long time ago. Your species can learn it too, if you listen. Torvek added, your people are different. Not just strong, but aware. You feel the world. You adapt. That is something even our best technology cannot replicate. Elias shrugged. We're just stubborn, curious, and willing to try again. That's what keeps us alive. The aliens looked at him with deep respect. He was not a soldier, not a scientist in their sense, just a human who understood life and chaos. But that understanding had saved them, and it would remain a lesson they could carry back to their world. Preparing to leave by midday, the Tyrellan rescue ship was in orbit. Its shining hull reflected sunlight as it descended toward the valley. The aliens boarded their ship with reverence, looking back at the shelter one last time. Caravan lingered. She placed her hand on the wall. "This will stay here," she said softly. "Even if we leave, it will stand as proof of what humans can do." Elias smiled faintly. "It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to anyone who can observe, adapt, and survive. That's the real power." Torvek stepped forward. "Do you plan to stay?" Elias shook his head. "My work here is done, but the lesson stays. The shelter, the methods, the respect for the planet, that's the real gift." The aliens finally boarded the ship, leaving Elias alone on the ridge. He looked at the valley below. Trees swayed gently, rivers ran quietly, and the shelter stood proud. A small smile appeared on his face. This place, this storm, had given him a reminder too. Humans were capable of more than they often believed. The shelter's legacy over the following days, the Tyrellans returned to orbit. They sent reports to their home planet, describing not just the planet and its storms, but the human who had survived them with nothing but skill and instinct. Caravan recorded a final note in her log. Day 14. Elias Ward has demonstrated that survival does not rely solely on technology. Observation, patience, courage, and adaptability are equally, if not more, important. Humanity has a strength we must respect and learn from. The Tyrellans decided to leave a small beacon near the shelter, ensuring that future travelers could find it. But more importantly, they carried Elias' lessons in their minds. They had learned that sometimes instinct and courage could surpass the most advanced machines. Back on the ridge, Elias packed his simple tools and prepared to leave Vrinus 9. He looked at the shelter one last time. Its walls, woven from vines and stones, its drainage trenches, and the mineral grounding lines, all represented more than survival. They represented human will and intelligence. A quiet departure. The day of departure was clear. The rescue ship descended slowly, its engines creating gentle gusts in the valley. Elias climbed aboard without hurry. He waved to the Tyrellans one last time. "You will survive," he said. "Remember to respect the planet and each other. That is all it takes." Caravan smiled, tears in her eyes. "We will remember. Always." The ship rose into orbit, leaving the valley quiet. The shelter remained untouched by wind or water. It was a testament, not to technology, not to aliens, but to the human mind and spirit. The lesson lives on years later. Explorers from Tyrellan returned to Vrinus 9. The shelter built by Elias Ward was still standing. Its walls were weathered but intact, its trenches still carrying water, its mineral lines still grounding the occasional lightning strike. The Tyrellans studied it with reverence. They rebuilt their equipment around it, and their new colonists learned from it. It became a teaching ground, a place where Tyrellan and other species could see what human ingenuity, patience, and adaptability could achieve. Caravan often said, "This is what humans can do when they refuse to give up. Not because they have the best tools, but because they have courage, observation, and will." Even Elias's name became a legend, not for power or conquest, but for something far more valuable, the ability to take nothing and build safety, understanding, and hope. Final reflection, Elias often thought about that valley. He remembered the storms, the Tyrellan's fear, and the way the world had tested him. He realized that humans had a gift, a combination of stubbornness, observation, and courage that allowed them to survive where others might fail. He knew that wherever humans went, deserts, ice fields, stormy worlds like Vrinus 9, they would leave marks. Not walls of metal and steel, but lessons in survival, resilience, and ingenuity. And as he looked at the stars from the rescue ship, he whispered quietly, "No storm lasts forever. But what you build in its path can last for generations." The shelter on Vrinus 9 stood as proof, a testament to a human who could create safety from nothing, a reminder that survival was not about machines or perfection, but about courage, adaptation, and the unyielding human spirit. And somewhere far across the stars, The lessons of Elias Ward continued to inspire, proving once again that humanity could face chaos, storms and impossible odds and prevail.